Hello and welcome to Cuyahoga Arts and Culture 2024 Project Support Panel. I'm Davon and I'm here with fellow staff member Julia, our co-chair, as well as the rest of our team, Laura, Maya, Jill, and Jake. For our audiences joining us online, you can find the captioning by clicking the live transcription button at the bottom of your page. Thank you to our panelists for serving on our interactive public panel, learning about our process, applicants, and funding criteria. And thank you to our listeners joining us. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture is the local public funder for arts and culture in Cuyahoga County. Our mission is to inspire and strengthen the community by investing in arts and culture. The goal of our project support grant making is to promote public access and encourage the breadth of arts and cultural programming in our community by supporting Cuyahoga County-based projects. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the land that we stand on and the place that we call Cuyahoga County is land that was claimed by the United States government through force, displacement, and treaties negotiated in bad faith. We acknowledge those of the Shawnee, Miami, Erie, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Haudenosaunee Confederacy, whose lands we stand on, and the thousands of Native Americans representing over 100 tribes who currently live in Northeast Ohio today. We thank the Lake Erie Native American Council for helping us develop this land and acknowledgement. We also want to take a moment to uplift CAC's values of equity. We choose to lead with racial equity in our work because the creation and perpetuation of racial inequities is embedded in our government and grant making. We confront the white supremacy that resides in our work because racial inequities across all indicators of success are deep and pervasive. We also recognize the power and potential that organizations who produce arts and culture programming have as bearers of culture. These institutions have the power to write the narrative about who belongs and who is valued. We encourage arts organizations to connect with resources to advance equity in their work. Please visit cacgrants.org/equity to learn more. It's also important to note that CAC does not make grants for funding decisions based on the basis of race, color, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, national origin, religion, disability, or any other characteristics protected by law. At this time, I'd like to introduce our Executive Director, Jill Paulson, with some words for our panelists and applicants.
Good morning. Thanks, Devon, and thanks to everyone on this call. It's fun to see some panelists that we've worked with for a long time, and those of you that are newer to either me or CAC, thank you so much for being here. My remarks are really quick, right? They're just to remind everyone that panel is important to us, and it's important that we do our work in public. As a public agency, it's really become a hallmark of what we do. I think I also just want to say thanks to Devon in advance for leading this panel along with the rest of his colleagues. They've put in hours of work over this last year to make sure that all the groups, over 300 this year in various panels and throughout the processes, feel like they have good opportunities to apply for public funds and feel cheered on along the way. So thanks to our applicants, thanks to our panelists, and thank you to my team who's doing the hard work here. So with that, I'm just going to turn it back to Devon. I think he's made it clear funding criteria is essential to what we do, and that's what we'll look forward to hearing from you today. So Devon, back to you.
Thank you, Jill. At this point, I'll ask each panelist to introduce themselves. Please share your name and gender pronouns, where you're located, and your professional connection to arts and culture. I'll go ahead and have the order pasted in the chat once again, and we'll go ahead and follow that order.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Lisa Harper Chang. My pronouns are she, her, and I am coming to you from Madison, Alabama, which is just a suburb of Huntsville. And my connection to arts and culture is as a social worker who's worked in creative community building and sort of using arts and culture as a way to bring communities together.
Hi, I'm Ethan Hayden. Pronouns are he, him. I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania, where I'm a program officer of arts and learning and also occasional grant administrator for Erie Arts and Culture. and I'm also involved in the arts sector as a practitioner, as a musician.
Hi, I'm Leslie Holt. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm coming from Tacoma Park, Maryland, which is a suburb of DC. My connection to the arts is I'm a visual artist. I've also worked at various arts nonprofits in various roles, including as a grant writer, and have a particular interest in the conjunction of art and community.
Good morning. I am Christopher Schramm. My pronouns are he, him. I am in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I am the Director of Development for the Kalamazoo Symphony Orchestra. We kick off our season this coming Saturday night.
That's Frances Tortorich. My pronouns are she, her, coming to you from Memphis, Tennessee, where there is a very rich arts and culture tapestry here in the city. And I am fortunate enough to work in museums in this city. And so I work as the Director of Development right now at the Children's Museum, but I've worked at other arts organizations in the city.
Thank you to all of you for your time and services. Now we'll go ahead and walk through the review process, and we'll work for those following the live stream. So for those who are following the live stream, I will introduce each applicant, organization, and project. I'll then lead the panel through a discussion focusing on each of the funding criteria at time. Panelists will be invited to comment on applications in relation to the funding criteria. We will have 3 minutes for public benefit, 2 for artistic and cultural vibrancy, and 2 for organizational capacity. Our panel co-chair, Julia, will keep us on track with time using the PowerPoint on screen. We will have allocated 8 minutes for each application. To keep things moving smoothly, panelists should plan to come off mute to indicate that they'd like to speak next. I might also call on panelists to speak if there may be, or if there's a need for it. After we go through the criteria, the panelists will submit their scores, which are tabulated by CAC staff. To our applicants, please do not contact or address the panel in any manner during the deliberations, electronically or otherwise. If an applicant believes that a panelist has presented incorrect information regarding their application, they should complete the information correction form, which is available at cacgrants.org/panel, and you also can find it in the chat. CAC staff will review the correction form to determine if it is an objective correction of misinformation. If it is, the panel chair, me, will read the correction to the panel for the public. An example of objective misinformation would be a panelist misstating the number of performances detailed in the application. This is an opportunity to clarify what was submitted with the application, but not to provide additional information. After the panel is complete, audience members are encouraged to participate in the public comment session by submitting comments via our online form at cacgrants.org/panel. The deadline to submit comments is at the conclusion of the project support panel deliberation, the end of the day today. So with that being said, now let's get started with our first review. Our first application for is Aradhana Committee for their project titled 2024 Cleveland Tiagara Festival. Their festival is the flagship event for the year. This will be their 44th festival in their history after losing 3 years to the pandemic. It will feature over 80 performances of South Indian classical music and dance by both professional and amateur artists over a period of 12 days. The professional performers will include the most celebrated artists in their respective fields. The festival will feature competitions and workshops for students of the arts. Would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to public benefit criterion, which is an organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
I will start us off. I saw strong use of listening and responding to their community, both internal and external, along with building and strengthening relationships in a strong way, and strong accessibility by offering 75% of their public offerings for free.
I've marked this section fair. I thought the application addressed the way the festival is accessible and inclusive, specifically with regard to artists that may be from marginalized populations in the US and or India, and also how it's inviting to the broader public. It addressed the ways in which the festival engages diverse audiences and builds relationships through reference to public school programming. I would have liked to have seen more information about power sharing and being responsive to its communities. For instance, there was reference to consultation with senior artists in India to develop festival lineups, but seemingly very little said about consultation with partners in the Cleveland area. I also think it would have been helpful to learn more about the educational programming, in particular the sustaining sampradaya. Like, how are students selected? Do the students pay fees? Do they receive payment? Because all that would speak to accessibility. But all that said, I do think that application demonstrates a fair public benefit.
I agree with Christopher that this was a strong public benefit, and also with Ethan that there should have been a little bit more in the application about the conversations with the local groups.
All right, next we'll move on to the artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criteria, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
This off in that I thought that this was extremely strong with the unique position in Cleveland to offer the arts and culture of Southeast India.
I rated this strong as well regarding its artistic and cultural vibrancy. I felt that it engaged a diverse team of arts and cultural professionals, and they're promoting diversity and inclusion through the festival. I think I wanted a little more of an explicit statement about the process of reflection, sort of leading to changes in sort of ensuring that the program stays relevant, but I still think it's very strong.
I agree. I scored this as very strong. I thought, in addition to what other panelists have said, that it's an incredible opportunity for both the artists and community members.
I likewise scored it strong. I thought it clearly demonstrated ways that the festival would increase artist capacity, engage a diverse team, find opportunities to support or to promote diversity, equity, inclusion. The supporting videos and images were all really well organized. I agree with Lisa that I would have liked to see more about reflection as to how to ensure that the program stays relevant. I honestly am confident that it happens, but it would be nice, to spell it out explicitly. But despite that minor constructive criticism, I've scored it very strong.
I agree with all my colleagues, and I also scored strong in this criterion.
The final criterion to discuss is organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its projects.
I thought the track record, the longevity of this program kind of spoke for itself. And also the sheer number of volunteers is really impressive. The volunteer engagement in this is really impressive.
I felt like it was a strong section here, particularly the balance between free and paid programming. The festival organizers seem to really understand and adapt their structure rather than just offering everything for free.
And I agree. I rated this project as very strong for the same reasons my colleagues have cited. One note, I would love more details on how they're measuring their progress on their stated goal, and maybe a refinement of that goal so it's measurable, but otherwise very strong.
I have the same notes that Lisa just shared. It's still strong in this category.
I marked this section fair. I thought the organizing committee's experience is impressive, and the fact that the festival, as has already been articulated, has such longevity and is working with such a large budget solely through volunteer support demonstrates successful organization and a sustained network of partners that believe in the mission. I second Lisa's thoughts about the way the goal was articulated. My main point of constructive criticism would be articulating where the very significant match of contributed income comes from. From what I could see in the application, that was not clearly articulated. But yeah, other than that, I think it was a very fair organizational capacity.
All right, so that concludes our time for Aradhana Committee. Panelists, please submit your scores and we'll turn next to Art of Me Productions in just a moment. Our next application is from Art of Me Productions for their project titled Power in Community Film. Art of Me Productions worked with Cleveland youth in 6th to 12th grade through storytelling, visual arts, and media literacy to help them identify who they are and who they want to be in their community. Students will identify a problem in their community and creatively write a short story on how to solve it through community engagement, beautification, and building relationships. They will be mentored by film professionals as they write their short stories. The best short story will be made into a short film. Would anyone like to get us started around this, how this application relates to public benefit criterion, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
Sure. Yeah, I scored this section strong. The applicant clearly understands and respects their community and seems to find opportunities at every level of the project for community involvement. The film selection committee, consisting entirely of community volunteers, is a nice example of power sharing. And there are numerous examples of ways in which relationships with schools, students, parents, etc., are built and strengthened throughout the process. Keeping the program free ensures accessibility, and making the film freely available invites the broader public in. So very strong.
I agree. I thought this was really strong. One piece of constructive criticism I had on this section, though, would have been a little bit more detail about how the selection committee came together. I think that would have helped really elevate this application.
I agree. The community connection part of this application is really strong. My only question is about the children who submit stories that aren't chosen for the film, which is most of the children, and what happens to them in terms of participation. My concern is that choosing one story can promote a sort of exceptionalism that can be damaging if not handled appropriately in a community. So I'd like to hear more information. I'm sure there are ways that that's happening, and forgive me if I missed that in the application. I just wanted to mention that.
I had some of the same thoughts that Leslie just stated. I would have been interested in seeing more details about the skills that were being developed with the students beyond the one student whose story was chosen. There is a lot to be gained from going through the process. I would have liked to have seen that detailed more to show a broader public benefit to all of the students involved who were not ultimately chosen to be filmed.
All right, next we'll move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criteria, which is an organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I thought the artistic and cultural vibrancy was strong in the application. One area I would have liked to see a little bit more was about the best story, and there wasn't a whole lot, and I might have missed it, about how the best was selected. There was a little bit about selection, but not about how best was defined. And so I would have liked to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah. I rated this as strong. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I rated this section as strong. The project has several plans for building the capacity of artists, from training youth in public speaking to inviting writers whose story is not selected to intern on the film set. Although in retrospect to Chris's point earlier, I think that could have been elaborated on as to what those interning opportunities would actually consist of. There's a broad team of community volunteers and professionals in the field that are engaged in the project. The programming is relevant to the community almost by definition, since the young participants are determining the specifics of the topics that are explored. And there's a strong emphasis on equity and inclusion, including considerations of mental health throughout the application.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll just agree. I rated this as strong as well. I loved that there was some just attention paid to an intergenerational aspect that really speaks to, again, what my colleagues have cited in terms of the inclusion.
All right, the final criterion to discuss is organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
I scored this section fair. I think it would have been nice to see some more specific information on the expertise of the team. For instance, no names were given, and reference to the experience was somewhat vague. There was reference to the team working in the creative field for many years, as opposed to saying things like they have a combined 67 years in filmmaking and 34 years in media production, or referencing specific individuals' experience. The project goal, however, was specific and achievable, and I like there's a plan to follow up with community members to assess the project's success. The budget is very clear and shows diverse sources of income, so I scored this section fair.
I appreciated the strong justification in this application for free programming, and thought that the organizational capacity was strong.
I also scored it strong. I really appreciated your supplemental links. I found that I wanted to actually see the film from the trailer, so thank you for that. And speaking about the goal statement, I agree with what Ethan said, but I also wanted to just put a little note. This is not something I took any points away. It was just, I would love to see kind of a refinement of that goal statement to speak more to the impact of your work. But you know, some of that is just out of my own curiosity too.
All right, so that will conclude our time for Art of Me Productions. Panelists, please submit your scores, and we'll turn next to Berea Arts Fest in just a moment. So our next application is from Berea Arts Fest for their project titled 2024 Berea Arts Fest. Celebrating their 34th year, the Berea Arts Fest returns to downtown Berea, Ohio on Sunday, September 8th, 2024. The annual community event, which takes place the second Sunday each September, is free and open to the public. They look forward to presenting a full schedule of musical and performing artists at multiple venues, regional artwork for sale, a kids creation station, a student art show, and many visual delights. They state that this is only possible thanks to the many volunteers and donors from their community. Would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to the public benefit criterion, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
I gave this section a fair. I am impressed by the longevity of this event, and it's obviously a staple in this community. I was a little concerned about, it sounds like they're making some efforts to diversify. They mentioned a multi-year project to change the makeup of the board, and this year's theme is all access, which appears to be a focus on physical disabilities, but they were engaging with folks with developmental disabilities and Down syndrome. So I was a little confused about those kind of partnerships. I admire that reaching out, but I'm wondering who's advising them on the particular organizations they're partnering with. And they were talking about 2024 working on other areas of diversity, including to BIPOC and LGBTQA communities. And for such a long-standing event, it feels a little bit late to suddenly be making these plans, and it caused me to it gave me pause, and I just had questions. I would have liked more specifics. I really would have liked more specifics about their plan in this area.
Yeah, like Leslie, I marked this section fair. I thought this year's theme and the related partnerships outlined to improve accessibility to people with different abilities are fantastic and clearly being undertaken thoughtfully. But I do think it would have been good to see what comparable steps were being taken to be inclusive of other historically marginalized populations. For instance, the application cites working to invite applications from BIPOC and LGBTQ artists, but didn't articulate like what does that actually look like in practice. Overall, though, it seems that significant steps are being taken, which is great. It seems that there are strong relationships with a variety of community members and partner organizations, but there wasn't a ton said about listening or responding to community. So for instance, is there opportunity for these student volunteers to communicate their thoughts on how the festival is conducted and things of that nature? So like Leslie, I think it could have been fleshed out a little bit more in some of those areas.
I agree with both what Ethan and Leslie said, but I did appreciate the community involvement with volunteers, the longstanding relationships with the city and other community groups. I'd like to applaud the festival for that.
And I went with actually strong, although I agree with the comments that have been made so far. I did appreciate that you have local residents on your board and that, again, you are involving sort of different generations in the execution of it. And while, again, I very much agree with what Leslie said, I still appreciate that you were reaching out to other organizations to partner in order to further the goals that you stated. So.
I also found a strong intentionality in the work around being inclusive and accessible. Since we're looking at this from a specific project set in a particular year, to Leslie's first, point about, is this organization a little late to the game? That might come into play if we were looking at an operating support program as opposed to a project support program. So for a project support, I feel like I should not necessarily be taking a look at 43 years of history, but their preparation in the project that's coming up a year from now. So I saw strong intentionality in the work towards that project.
All right. So speaking of which, we'll go ahead and move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy. The final criterion is to discuss the organizational capacity and organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project. Oh, I apologize. One moment. I actually skipped artistic and cultural vibrancy. This is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project. So please share your thoughts regarding this criterion.
I'll jump in here to get us started. I felt in this criterion, there was fair work being done to promote DEIB and engaging diverse teams of artists. I would have liked to have seen more specifics on the how, though. How is the organization actively recruiting diverse artists?
I would have liked to see that as well, but I also applaud the efforts being made to implement processes to diversify the board, and I'd like to offer up my suggestion to the organization that given that your area is 82% white, you might also consider the other avenues of diversity and what that can mean across experience and abilities, and not just necessarily racial diversity, which is of course important, but I do want to offer that. I also appreciated that you're supporting up and coming arts administrators through the intern program.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said already. I marked this section strong. In particular, I appreciated there were several opportunities to build the capacity of artists, especially young artists.
All right, we'll go ahead and move forward with the final criterion, which is organizational capacity and organization's ability to successfully plan and manage its project.
I marked this section fair. The leadership team is clearly accomplished and experienced, and the project budget is clear. The goal to increase the number of applications from BIPOC or LGBTQ artists is a quantifiable goal. So it was unclear to me why the applicants plan to assess the success of this goal specifically doesn't include quantification. They may very well have a good reason for this, but it wasn't clearly articulated. Also, the application form does specifically state that the start and end dates of the project should not span the entire calendar year, but that is what this applicant did put.
I just wanted to say, let's see, I marked this strong, and I just want to commend the organization for the longevity of this event and resiliency through COVID, and the intention to really diversify what they're doing.
I marked this strong as well. I did say I appreciated their goal statement to a point. I agree with what you said, Ethan. And I would love to see, and I realize because of space constraints, this isn't always possible, but when you mention having a survey, I love to see samples of those surveys. And I think that's a great opportunity for you to kind of report out on initial results, especially for such a long-standing project like this, that it would help, I think, bolster your argument in terms of effectiveness and impact.
All right, so that concludes our time for Berea Arts Fest. Panelists, please submit your scores and we'll turn next to the Bureau of Drug Abuse, Cleveland Treatment Center in just a moment. Our next application is from the Bureau of Drug Abuse, Cleveland Treatment Center, Incorporated, for their project titled The Physics and Philosophy of Funk, The Mothership Connections. Their plot: cultural icons, Doctors Colonel West, Julia Earls, and artists of the P-Funk movement, Cleveland's own Michael Hampton, aka Kid Funkadelic, and Sheila Horn of the Brides of Funkenstein all team up to quell the escalating racial and social unrest resulting from the unjust death of George Floyd. Their goal is to use music and introspective dialogue to address and keep MLK's dreams of a world where children are not judged by their skin, but by the content of their character. Would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to public benefit criteria, which is, again, the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
I can begin. I rated this fair. The project in general seems more aspirational than concrete to me. Perhaps they're not far enough along in their planning when they had to write this application. There is a very clear public benefit, but I wanted to see more detail about how they're doing their outreach to marginalized communities. And since these communities are not usually a part of traditional marketing and outreach practices, how are they ensuring that these communities are feeling welcome when they attend a performance or performances brought to them? And how are the real and the perceived barriers being broken down by the organization with the communities they're reaching out to?
I marked this section strong. I thought there was a clear understanding of who the applicant's community is, and there are strong relationships and partnerships in place. Though to Chris's point, I think the elaboration that he was looking for could have been helpful, absolutely. I think it would have been nice to see more explicitly stated information with regard to power sharing and responding to community feedback, but overall, I still mark the section strong.
I also marked this strong. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Leslie.
No, go ahead, Francis, please.
Okay. I thought the CTC, if I'm abbreviating that correctly, the CTC has an impressively diverse population, but I agree with Ethan that I didn't necessarily see how the power sharing with that community was really being described. So I would like to see a little bit more in the application about that process in particular.
Yeah, I agree with what other panels have said, but I found it a really nice, clear description of who their community is, a really specific description of all the stakeholders, and fantastic engagement of youth and the other service providers in the community. So I thought that was really impressive. I rated it strong.
I rated it strong as well, and I agree with sort of the comments that I've made before. I just wanted to say I thought they did a good job demonstrating the inclusive and engaging diverse populations in both creation and viewership, and that they've built a project that allows for contributions from diverse populations. And so it will be great to see kind of, again, how you move forward with on the power sharing front, which I think is a particularly hard phase to get to in terms of public benefit. And
All right, next we'll move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criterion, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I rated this strong. I thought it was the strongest category of this application. I was really impressed again with some of the specific language that they use to describe things. They're partnering with established artists. One of their goals was reactions to performances should be visceral and highly positive. I think their subject matter is really edgy and ambitious, and they're clearly passionate about using arts to improve the health and well-being of the community. They're backing that up with stats from SAMHSA. And when I looked at the previous project, King Heroine, I thought that was really powerful and demonstrated their ability to see a project through to the end.
Any other comments around artistic culture and vibrancy?
Sure. I also rated this very strong, and I just wanted to add to what Leslie had said, that I felt like they incorporated a nice process of reflection while engaging a diverse team of arts and cultural professionals in sort of multiple modalities of diversity. So I thought that was nicely done.
All right, we will move on to the final criterion, which is organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
I marked this section fair. I thought the production team displays significant experience, fantastic experience, but I do think it would have been good to hear more about the administrative team, those who are facilitating the production. It was a little unclear how the project goal was distinct from the overall project itself. The budget was laid out clearly, and the work samples demonstrate the organization's ability to mount comparable productions. So I've marked this section very fair.
I rated this section fair to strong, and primarily my comment would be about the goal statement. I would love to see the goal statement not include the actual completion of the production, because I think I'm going in assuming that you will do that, and maybe focus on either the goal of reaching diverse audiences in meaningful ways, or which you did touch on. And I'd love to see your method relate directly back to that, maybe post-production surveys, something like that. And I liked your supplemental video links. It's nice.
I also rated this section fair. Like Ethan said, there is very strong descriptions of the artistic personnel, but again, I would have liked to see a little bit more about how the application or the project in the application really relates to the mission. I always like to hear how projects are advancing your mission.
Any other remarks for organizational capacity? All right, that will conclude our time for the Bureau of Drug Abuse, the Cleveland Treatment Center Incorporated. Panelists, please submit your scores, and we'll turn next to Cassidy Theatre in just a moment. Our next application is from Cassidy Theatre for their project titled Cassidy Theatre Celebrating 50 Years of Theater in Parma Heights. Cassidy Theatre seeks project support to produce a suite of shows selected by the public to celebrate 50 years of enriching the cultural landscape of Parma Heights through theater. Over the past 5 decades, Cassidy Theatre has grown into a pillar of cultural excellence. This project aims to commemorate the remarkable journey of Cassidy Theatre and its impact on the lives of Parma Heights residents while envisioning a vibrant future for the performing arts in our city for the next 50 years. Would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to the public benefit criterion, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with this community through its project?
Started, I thought that this section was fair and that I was left with a lot of questions. I thought that there was some really great partnerships being developed, but I was left with several questions about, again, I think this is a little bit about adding some information about Parma Heights for those who are not as familiar with the area. I thought that there needed to be some clarification about patrons equaling their community. Is that the case? I didn't know. Are you offering discounts to your residents of the neighborhood? And then I'd like to hear a little bit more about that sensory partnership. It really seems to be a point of pride, but I would have loved to hear how that was developed. Is there some sharing of power with your community in that regard?
Yeah, I agree with Francis's thoughts. I also marked this section fair. I thought the democratic play selection process demonstrates a form of power sharing and listening to community, but there's not a clear explication of who the community is. For instance, there's clearly an emphasis on creating accessibility for patrons with sensory needs, but no indication as to why that is a particular priority to this community. Again, I'm sure that they've been thoughtful about this and why that is the case, but it would be good to specifically articulate that to those of us who are not familiar with the area. There's a willingness to be inclusive of all backgrounds, but little indication as to how that's being tangibly pursued. So for instance, the application refers to casting practices ensuring diverse representation, but doesn't elaborate on what those casting practices are or how they are going to ensure that. All that being said, there seems to be significant enthusiasm and engagement in the applicant's programming, which is a good sign of public benefit.
Yeah, I agree with what you both have said, and the sensory-friendly productions I think is excellent. I'm curious about the focus on that. I did leave this section with more questions than answers about folks with limited income, specifics about workshops, camps, master classes. I would have liked a lot more specific information in this particular area as well. I rated it fair.
I rated it fair to strong. I appreciated the partnership with the Cooper Foundation and that commitment to sensory inclusive programming. Certainly agree with my fellow colleagues that more details would be helpful. I appreciated the feedback mechanism for identifying relevant themes for future programming. And then I did see in a later section that you mentioned that residents of the community serve on your board. I think that would have been helpful to not have to search for that, because for me, I'm always look for that sort of demonstration in terms of how you're engaging the community and having them involved in your decision making.
I scored on the high end of fair for all of the same reasons that my colleagues have stated.
All right, next we'll move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criterion, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
Rated this section strong, and that I really appreciate the partnerships with other arts organizations to host performances, as well as working with the community and your patrons to be reflective of your broad themes.
I went again on the high end of fair because I felt that the programming is definitely relevant to the community, specifically for this 50th anniversary season having been voted on by their patrons.
Likewise, I scored this high end affair for the reasons my colleagues have articulated.
And I did fair to strong. I just wanted to say, with such a long history, there's just rich data to mine from the testimonials and memories that you're collecting. And so I think just looking at that in terms of, again, demonstrating the impact that your organization has had in its community can be really powerful. I did appreciate your inclusion of local stakeholders and commitment to inclusion from a few approaches.
All right, and the final criterion to discuss is organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
I rated this area strong. I felt they had a clearly defined project goal that's both specific and measurable, well-established volunteer committees, and leadership participation.
Likewise, I marked this section strong. I thought the multidisciplinary team seems well equipped to complete the project, even despite the current absence of executive leadership. The organization has also demonstrated consistent growth over the past 3 years, which is impressive considering what the past 3 years entailed for all of us. I just want to point out, even though I marked this section strong, the application form does state the project date shouldn't span the full calendar year, and they did indicate a full calendar year worth of project duration. But despite that small oversight, it was still a strong section.
I agree. I rated this as strong as well, and thought that you had outlined organizational processes and structures that were intentional, methodical, and reflective. And I do want to, again, second what Chris said. I very much appreciated your goal statement. And I always ask for this. Would love to see a sample of your survey and some reporting out of results, just since you're collecting it.
I'll echo what my other panelists have said, and that it was very strong. One of the things I thought that stood out to me was that although the organization is keeping tabs on the neighborhood demographics, I don't necessarily think I saw that in the programming, and that just might not have been covered by this project grant.
All right, so that will conclude our time for Cassidy Theatre. Panelists, please submit your scores and we'll take a short break, about a 3-minute break, and we'll come back. The next organization we'll review will be Chagrin Arts, but we'll go ahead and have the timer up on the screen. And don't worry, we'll have a longer break later. But thank you, and we'll be back soon. All right, we'll have a few more moments to get recentered to begin our next review. All right, so our next application is from Chagrin Arts for their project titled Chagrin Arts Presents the NEO premiere of the opera Blind Injustice. Chagrin Arts Project is producing the Northeast Ohio premiere of the opera Blind Injustice, which addresses wrongful conviction. The project is in partnership with the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association and will be open on October 2nd, 2024, the 10th anniversary of International Wrongful Conviction Day. The performance will be at the CMBA Conference Center in downtown Cleveland. 3 additional performances will follow on October 3rd, 4th, and 5th in 2024. Would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to public benefit, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
I'll start. I left this section, this is a really interesting project. I left this section not knowing exactly how they defined their community in particular. And I just had a lot of questions about that. Beyond the lawyers who serve exonerees and the exonerees themselves, I was a little confused about who this project is serving in particular, and how they converse with their community.
I marked this section as strong. My initial reaction was that the applicant had a very clear understanding of their community, though upon Leslie's notes, I can see where the elaboration that she's requesting would have been helpful. But they do denote the ways that the community, that the area that they're serving has been particularly impacted by wrongful conviction. Through the diverse partnerships that seem to be continuing to expand, there have been numerous ways to demonstrate respect and responsiveness to the community and power sharing. The project and larger mission is inclusive, and there are clear steps being taken to ensure the production is accessible to individuals who live outside the area where the full performance will take place. And the support letters underscore all of this even further.
I also,
sorry, Christopher.
I also rated it strong for many of the same reasons that Ethan has just stated.
See where Leslie is missing. However, I also, like Ethan said, I feel like there was a lot of response to community events, Remembrance Days, things like that. And I really see this particular performance serving as a continued catalyst for additional engagements with the community.
And I rated this strong as well. I agree with you, Ethan. And I just wanted to cite that I really appreciate that you have impacted individuals and their family members on your board.
All right, next we'll move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criterion, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I marked this section strong. The fact that the production will rely exclusively on creative professionals in the area, I think demonstrates that the project will help regional creatives thrive, though a specific articulation as to how their capacity would be built through the process could have been a way to strengthen that even further. But regardless, the team will be diverse and will foreground DEI principles. So yeah, I marked this section strong.
I marked this section strong as well. Just thought it's a really engaging and creative project. I really like that you're using actual transcripts from this trials. There's many different forms of music, that there's an art exhibit by people affected by this issue. The sample clip confused me a little bit in terms of, I was expecting to see a highlight of the stories by the exonerees, and it was mostly about the lawyers and the prosecutors and the forensic scientists. So I might suggest a different clip, or including, adding a clip to give sort of the more full breadth of the experience that the audience would have, including, this was all opera, including those other music forms that they had mentioned in their application.
I also marked strong in this criterion, specifically around the DEIB work and the reflection work that is leading to the creation of the project.
Just like, I agree with my fellow panelists, and I would just like to add that the thing that was missing for me in this section was that I didn't see a lot of detail about how you're finding and diversifying, how you're finding diverse artists and recruiting those artists. I would have liked just a little bit more detail there.
And the final criterion to discuss is the organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
I went on the high end of fair here. I feel like they have a strong planning team. The project goal reads to me as, in a way, a reiteration of the reason the project is being created instead of a goal within the project. And the goal is stated, I find hard to measure. Those would be my comments in this.
Yeah, I marked this section strong, though I had the same feedback on the goal that Chris articulated. I thought the leadership and production team are all really well equipped to implement the project. The long development and incubation process, I think, demonstrates thoughtful planning and seems to have served only to strengthen the momentum and the relationships between partners. The budget is very clear. In particular, I think it's really nice to see specific contributions included among the income categories. So not everything is dumped into a donations category, but these are articulated individually. That makes the budget even more clear and even more strong to a panelist's eyes, I think.
I also marked this the high end of fair. I liked the goal quite a bit. I liked the question. They wanted people to come away with, what can we do? I was curious about how they were going to measure that. You know, I think there are ways that you can measure that for sure, but I had questions about how we were going to measure that.
I rated this section as strong as well. And I want to second again Ethan's comment about the budget. I really appreciated that articulation. And I have the same note that all my fellow panelists have already articulated, which is, would love more information about how you plan to measure the progress toward your goal.
And that concludes our time for Chagrin Arts. Panelists, please submit your scores, and next we'll turn to ChamberFest Cleveland in just a moment. Our next application is from ChamberFest Cleveland for their project titled Community Engagement Events for Seasons 12, Sacred and Profane. This project focuses on free public events and youth outreach to support ChamberFest Cleveland Season 12, Sacred and Profane, a festival exploring chamber music programs and an inquisitive introspection and joyous celebration. This community engagement events are designed to introduce newcomers of all ages to the classical chamber music tradition, particularly those from communities not currently reached by ChamberFest. Would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to public benefit criterion? This is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project.
I thought that the application was fair in this regard, and that the application felt a little organization focused rather than public focused. But that said, I do like that there were several moments of reflection and evaluation that are impacting the festival's future, particularly the expansion of public days based on past performance, and then the hybrid approach to free and paid programming.
I also rated the section fair. I was looking for more details of the community engagement component that will happen as part of the 24 festival. I was not getting a full sense of what is actually planned, which audiences and communities will be engaged, and I would have liked to have seen more demographics shared for previous or anticipated audiences.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Lisa,
I
you're
think
muted.
you're muted.
Sorry, sorry about that. I rated this fair to strong. I appreciated their descriptions of their audience segments and found their community partnerships to be a good indicator of how they are bringing what they do and working with new audiences and community partners like Open Doors, although I do appreciate the previous comments about how it does seem more organizational focused. I appreciate that they're featuring works by BIPOC chamber composers and BIPOC performers, and would love to hear more about how power sharing and reflective feedback from community members influence their programming.
I also marked this section fair. I think the applicant's community is very clearly circumscribed. I appreciate the steps being taken to ensure that both artists and composers represent diverse communities. It would have been helpful to see how the applicant listens to its community and shares power with them. And then to elaborate on Chris's point a little bit, I think the project's components, particularly the community engagement ones, are a little unclear, specifically with regard to like workshops. Like, what does a hands-on music making workshop consist of? What do youth writing activities consist of? What is a workshop that explores musical communication? Like, I think each of those programs could have been explained with a little more clarity.
All right, next we'll move on to the Artistic and Cultural Vibrancy Funding Criterion, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I rated this strong. I was impressed by their emphasis on using traditional and non-traditional spaces for their concerts, and going into 2 schools with primary BIPOC students, and making their engagement events free. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
I rated strong in this criterion, specifically picking up on their efforts to feature BIPOC musicians in their performances and to feature music of living, female identifying, and or BIPOC composers, in addition to the traditional male, white, Eurocentric composers that primarily make up, the chamber music world traditionally.
I rated this strong, mostly for the intentionality about bringing informal performances to unexpected venues. I really felt like that is really key in breaking down arts barriers. I just don't know about it. So I applaud the festival for that.
Also marked this strong for the reasons already stated.
I marked this strong, and I just want to add the note that I have that I appreciated the partnership with dance as well. So nice to bring other disciplines in.
All right, so the final criterion to discuss is the organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan and manage its project.
I went on the high end of fair. I think the creative team is strong, experienced, and connected throughout the music world. The stated project goal reads to me as a reiteration of the project itself. And I think a future application could be strengthened if they had a more specific and measurable goal that is within their overall project.
I felt that this was a fair section of the application. I wanted to share advice for the organization that to make sure that you're documenting everything as you try to reach that additional sponsorship and grant goal. It'll really be helpful in providing that value to your sponsors.
I agree with my panelists and wanted to say that the goal is a little too overreaching, but I appreciated your very specific measures of success. I think you could have picked sort of one of those areas to highlight here and separate them out. In particular, retaining current partners plus 2 to 3 organizations. That's a very specific measurement of your success. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I just want to second what Leslie said. Again, it is a very comprehensive goal statement. I think that was my strengths-based way of addressing what my fellow panelists have said. But then how detailed and specific you were in terms of your use of surveys and how you're measuring sort of indicates to me that you are you have the ability, I think, to make a more refined goal statement. And I think that will, again, help you make a stronger argument for the impact of your programming. So just think about that for future grants. And I enjoyed your postcard video and your supplementals, and I'm a Kandera fan, so love the name of your festival.
All right, so that concludes our time for ChamberFest Cleveland. Panelists, please submit your scores, and we'll turn next to City of Ballet of Cleveland in just a moment. Our next application is from City Ballet of Cleveland for their project titled A Chance to Dance. A Chance to Dance is an outreach program that allows a City Ballet of Cleveland teaching artists to teach dance classes to students at local schools. Selected students who show promising talent, natural ability, a desire to learn, and a passion for movement will receive scholarships to continue their dance training with the company. Would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to the public benefit criterion, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
Application that had a fair job of showing public benefit. I feel like the program itself or project itself was very impactful, but I would have liked to have a better understanding of sharing voices with the community and the development, the desire to develop a program like this.
I also rated it as fair. I wanted to see more demographics about the community they are serving. They use the word underserved throughout their application, but they're not backing that word up with any details or demographics. I would have also liked to see more details about what skills students are developing, and enhancing by their participation beyond the often stated goal of trying to recruit for their company. So about the students who don't become dancers in the company, what's in it for them in participating in this program?
I agree with those comments. And I just wanted to speak to some of the language that I think Christopher referenced. It gave me a feeling, and I don't know that it's accurate, but it gave me a feeling of sort of a top-down approach, that you are bringing this excellent programming into the community. And I don't doubt that it's excellent and you're very passionate about what you do. But I didn't see a response to the community, and I didn't see sort of partnership with the community. A lot of focus on sort of the successful students versus engaging with students about your passions. So I had some concerns about that, and a little bit of a bootstraps mentality, that students can do anything if they set their mind to it, without sort of recognizing some of the barriers to that and addressing some of that in your application.
I rated this as fair as well, and just wanted to add on to what Leslie was saying. I kind of had the same experience that I think some of the language used, and I think Christopher, you highlighted some of that as well, kind of demonstrates a lack of power sharing, maybe understanding of the community. And I don't think you meant it this way, but at times came across as a little patronizing, which again, I think Leslie, you had a much better way of phrasing that it's more of that top-down approach. And I know that it can be really difficult. It's sort of a philosophical shift for so many art forms to kind of look at this power sharing model versus a more hierarchical structure of the arts, particularly in classical arts. And so I know that that can be hard. And I think that's just room for some growth and some training in terms of how your language reflects your philosophy in mutual respect and exchange versus a more traditional definition of outreach that we might see from some organizations. I do think you have a long-standing relationship with the schools, which is a great start. And you're certainly demonstrating a desire to be inclusive and engaging to diverse populations, which is certainly why, again, it's more of a hint of warning in terms of how your language is coming across than a belief that this is how, what you actually believe. I just think that actually embracing the communities you're serving and recognizing what the members of those communities can bring to your programming comes across with different language choices. So.
All right, so next we'll move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criterion, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I'll kick off on this only because it's echoing Lisa's previous thoughts about thinking that the application was a fair representation of some of these artistic and cultural vibrancy pieces. I like that the program provides these pathways to ballet, but would have liked to have a better understanding of the real and perceived barriers that the students in Shaker Heights are facing. The application did not really specify that, like a better understanding of the dancers in the company and their representation as it relates to the students in these neighborhoods.
Yeah, I would echo both of those comments. And I wanted to add, I rated this as fair too. I really appreciated though your expansion from doing a 30-minute performance at these locations to doing a 6-week intensive class for these students. I think that's really commendable and ambitious and wonderful. I'm wondering how, like we've talked about, how the program is accessible to the students, how it's in dialogue with their culture, traditions, and beliefs, and a little bit of concern about focusing on deficits of this community rather than what they bring to you and the larger community.
I also rated fair here, and I'm wondering, is there involvement with classroom teachers or school administrators or the students themselves, the families of the students, the community in shaping the way the program exists when it comes into a school? Is there dialogue, again, power sharing, a term we've used several times this morning, in the creation of the artistic work that is going on a daily basis or weekly basis with the students?
All right, so the final criterion to discuss is the organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
I marked this section strong. I thought the leadership team is experienced and well qualified. The plan to measure how and whether dance improves academic performance is both specific and achievable. And then the other metrics for measuring impact are great to see and could likely be used in the future to strengthen grant applications even further. It's great to see transportation fees for students included in the budget. And the budget overall is very clear.
I agree with Ethan that I really appreciate seeing some of these barrier alleviating budget line items like the transportation, the cost for participation. I thought the goal could have been a little bit more defined just to help both the City Ballet of Cleveland and Cuyahoga Arts and Culture really define success moving forward.
I agree with all of that. I really appreciated the detailed budget and a budget that reflects, you know, how you're going to implement this program. I thought the evaluation of your goal, it felt really ambitious. I wanted to have a sense that you've done that before and that you had an idea of how to do that. It puts what I thought is sort of a heavy burden on parents and school administrators. And I was just questioning how realistic that was and wanted more specifics about, you know, was this a 5-page survey or 3 questions, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree with everything that my fellow panelists have said so far. Rated this as strong as well. And I, you know, always when you mention surveys, I always want to see examples of those, I think, for the reasons that Leslie just enumerated there. So
I rated fair in this area, and one of the words that jumps out in my notes is looking for context, speaking to some of the same points that Leslie made in the evaluation component of the stated goal.
All right, so that concludes our time for City of Ballet of Cleveland. Panelists, please submit your scores and we'll turn next to CityMusic in just a moment. Before we move forward, I'm looking to my panelists. I'm aiming to get through 2 more reviews before we go to an extended break. How does that sound? Give me a heads up, nod. All right, sounds great. So our next application is from CityMusic Cleveland for their project titled Gerard Impichawacha Tati Composer Residency. Jared Tate Composer Residency will include a series of concerts featuring Tate's compositions, including a commissioned work for the City Music Chamber Orchestra and an education and engagement program curated by Tate that features local Indigenous performance artists. Would someone like to get us started on how this application relates to public benefit criterion, which is an organization's ability to meaningfully connect to its community through its project?
I felt this had a very strong public benefit component, especially in the areas of inclusivity and the engagement of diverse populations. They're obviously building and strengthening their relationships with Cuyahoga County's Native American First Nations populations and extended community.
Totally agree. I rated this very strong. I appreciated even the language in your mission statement being about eliminating barriers, connecting with the neighborhood, enriching existing cultural offerings. I thought that was really strong.
Go ahead.
I was just going to second. I thought the application was very strong for the reasons already articulated, and yeah, I think like what was already said about the mission statement addressing inclusivity. That was all fantastic to see.
And I rated this very strong as well. I appreciated the partnerships with faith-based and cultural-based organizations like the churches and LENAC, respectively. And the aims of the project were just really powerful and a great opportunity to build a more inclusive community. And I do love that you're working with Praxis as well.
Sprinkle on another strong rating here. And I thought the choice to offer your free versus pay what you wish performances as a very interesting concept. As well as the selection of venues. Like Lisa said, I think that balance of a variety of venues, it feels very intentional throughout the application as a way to reach your broad audiences.
All right, next we'll move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criterion, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I marked this section as strong. The creative team being engaged is diverse and represents a collection of traditions that have been historically marginalized. It would have been nice to see specific plans to build the capacity of artists, but it's still clear that it will be of direct benefit to those creatives that are participating.
Agree with that. I also enjoy the extension to communities through storytelling about the community, and particularly like the language of overlooked historical treasures.
I also marked strong the engagement of diverse team of arts professionals and identifying opportunities to promote DEIB work throughout the entire project.
All right, so the final criterion to discuss is organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan and manage its project.
And this is a fair section. I feel like the staff seem well qualified, but I think I just needed a little bit more details about your organization's capacity.
And I felt it was strong. They had a specific and measurable goal with a clear execution plan. One little thing I would have enjoyed that if you had taken the opportunity to make one of your supplemental material attachments to be something focused on Mr. Tate to give us a chance to learn more about him instead of Googling him like I did.
Yeah, I take that point. That's a great observation. I also marked this section strong for some of the reasons already articulated. I like that the community satisfaction surveys were described as representing a spirit of curiosity rather than a desire for validation. And I also appreciate that in the budget, there is a plan for alternative revenue.
I'll just second. Yeah, I rated this strong as well, and I appreciated their goal statement and plan to measure that. So nice job.
All right, so that concludes our time for City Music Cleveland. Panelists, please submit your scores, and we'll turn next to Cleveland Contemporary Chinese Culture Association in just a moment. So our next application is from Cleveland Contemporary Chinese Culture Association for their project titled Cultural and Arts Performances for Seniors in the General Public in Cuyahoga County. To perform Chinese culture-oriented shows like dancing, singing, and music instruments for seniors at various senior centers across Cuyahoga County, the performers are mainly students and teachers from Cleveland Contemporary Chinese Culture Association. Would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to public benefit criterion, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
Sure, I'll start. I rated this project as fair to strong, or sort of on the low end of strong, because I do think that featuring filial piety through Chinese arts and music to not only the Cleveland Chinese community by the Chinese community, but also to the greater Cleveland community is important and vital and promotes inclusion and diversity. And bringing those works to senior centers as well increases accessibility to interested parties. I appreciate the intergenerational aspect. It shows an understanding of their core audience and community members. And I wanted to see just more explicit statements of power sharing that can be done through board composition and sort of who you're including there and other ways that I think you've probably heard in our assessment of other applicants.
Agree with that, and I would have just liked to have a better understanding of the demographic makeup of some of these performance venues. I know that the senior population is often an underserved but forgotten demographic, and so I appreciate the intentionality to bring the arts to this group. But again, I would have liked to just have a better understanding of the locations and why they were selected.
I also rated fair, also picked up on the intergenerational aspect of a lot of their work, and the fact that they do not charge when they go into these facilities so that they can be as accessible as possible from a financial standpoint.
I agree with everything my colleagues have said, and I just wanted to mention I appreciated the language about music being a good way to create connections without a language barrier. I thought that was a nice touch.
All right, so next we'll go ahead and move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criterion, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I marked this section fair. While the applicant's intended audience is clearly explained, it was not clear, at least to me, exactly who the artists participating in the performances are. For instance, are they school students or creative professionals or some mix of both? The applicant demonstrates the impact of the project on the audience, but not as much the impact on the artists conducting the programming. So for instance, will the artists be paid for their work? Despite this, the DEI principles at the foundation of the program are clear.
I gave it a fair review in that there is clearly an artistic legacy here of 30 years of teaching, but I would have liked to see some additional information about the artist teaching, like the collective numbers of year teaching, the different types of arts being presented by the teachers, and then the year-to-year retention from the Chinese school and whether students progress through their artistic growth.
I also marked fair here, and I'm wondering to what degree the communities they serve and or the students who participate in the performances are included in the planning and creative decisions, or is it sort of top down, this is what we teach, thus this is what we perform? would have been interested to know if there was, you know, sort of, again, power sharing that we've talked about before in the creative process.
And I rated this fair to strong and agree with all the comments that have preceded mine. I just wanted to add the note that I do appreciate that you're being expansive about your definition of arts, including martial arts, as well as your traditional classical arts.
All right, so the final criterion to discuss is organizational capacity, or organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
I rated this as strong. Again, the long-standing presence of this program speaks to your capacity. The goal is, I think, too general, especially how you're going to measure that. Are you looking to get invited back by all of the places you've performed? 80% of them, I'd really like to know a number on that. Really impressed by really passionate and involved, both the volunteers and the board members are. That's very impressive.
I also marked the section as fair. I thought the applicant has a demonstrated record of successfully implementing this and similar projects. Like Leslie, I thought the goal could have been a bit more specific, and that the relationship between the goal and its success metric seems indirect, because you can absolutely present successful performances without necessarily being invited back. The income sources in the budget I thought could have been more clear. For instance, what is the exact source of the CCCCA contributions? The expense part of the budget was clear though. I think it would have been good to see exactly how grant funds would have been spent. For instance, would they go exclusively to production expenses or something else? And then, as I pointed out in a couple other applications, the application form asks that this project start and end dates do not span the whole calendar year.
I just wanted to support Ethan's note about, again, I definitely wanted more details on how the CAC funds would have been used, just more detail in general. And I think that applies to the goals and statement as well, and how you plan to measure.
I'll reiterate what my fellow panelists have said, but I would also like to note for this and some other applications that free does not always equal inclusive. It certainly reduces a barrier, but just because you're free does not mean that you are being inclusive of your community.
I also marked fair for many of the reasons that have already been stated.
All right, so that concludes our time for Cleveland Contemporary Chinese Culture Association. Panelists, please submit your scores, and we'll turn next to Les Délices after our break. So we'll go ahead and have a 5-minute break so that we can readjust and get through the last few reviews for the day. All right, just a few more seconds before we prepare to conclude our application reviews. All right, so our next application is Les Délices for their project titled Centering Black Artistry in Early Music. Their project connects artists with Cuyahoga County residents through a constellation of performance and conversation events centering the representation of diverse voices in early music, featuring contemporary artists and the historical legacy of Black British writer and composer Charles Ignatius Sancho. They will provide multiple community access points, including ticketed and free concerts, book group discussions, workshops with student musicians, and a new episode of their new web series, Salon Era. Would someone like to get us started with how this application relates to public benefit criterion, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
I can get started. I thought that the application was fair in discussing how the public benefit will be met. I would have liked to see the organization communicate a little bit more with the audiences rather than just reflecting on them. And while those that participate may be very deeply impacted by the project, I thought that the application lacked information about how those diverse communities are engaged with the project.
I marked this section strong. I thought the program, while essentially musical, also has entry points through other art forms, which would enhance accessibility and increase awareness of the topics at the heart of the project, each of which has to do with the historical erasure of non-white voices. It seems that there are unique partnerships being established or strengthened, which demonstrate ways to respond to community needs while also furthering accessibility.
I rated it strong as well for the reasons Ethan outlined. And I think what would have probably strengthened the application more for me too was more of a demonstration of power sharing within the project. Again, we've talked a lot about power sharing today, so just needed that more explicitly stated. But for all the reasons Ethan just lined out, I loved your relationship with the library, with Cromwell House, and excited about the potential of the project.
I also rated it strong, specifically in the areas understanding, respecting, listening, and responding to the community. Yes, agree with my colleagues' comments about the power sharing.
I marked it high fair to strong. Am I unmuted? Yes, I am. It's another mission statement that I love. Using the word delight in a mission statement delights me. And I like that you talk about your relevance, your sustainability, your welcoming of collaboration, embracing digital media. I see your flexibility in responding to COVID with the music meditations, really looking at how you can get interest from your audience, even with those, very challenging situations. I have a note, and I apologize, I don't remember the specifics, but I have a note that some of the language in your sample materials feels very intellectual and traditional. I was sort of surprised by that. And I was struggling to see how this was a bridge to audience who have no reference point or experience with this kind of music. So I just thought that was something to look at.
All right, next we'll move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criteria, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I rated this as strong. I thought that I like that the artistic programming goes just beyond the music and includes dance and web and literature. I also enjoy the blend between contemporary and the historical nature of the organization. Excuse me. And then I also really enjoy the programming with schools.
I also rated it strong, specifically in the areas of promoting diversity throughout Baroque music and engaging a diverse team of arts professionals.
I rated it strong for the reasons already stated, and also including the fact that there are demonstrated ways in which the organization is building the capacity of regional artists, specifically by increasing pay rates.
And I rated this strong as well. The one note I have is that I just wanted a more explicit explanation of sort of what reflective processes are in place to incorporate community feedback, but otherwise I thought it was well done.
All right, so the final criterion to discuss is the organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
It's incredibly strong. I like that there were several pieces. I like several pieces of the application, particularly that the organization kept the online programs post-pandemic. I think that we all learned a lot from that. And I appreciate the organization really being reflective of the industry and taking a look at their pricing for artists.
Go ahead, Lisa.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. I rated it fair in this criterion. And although the stated goal begins at a reiteration of the overall project, the narrative does finally include a specific goal within the project, and they shared how that goal will be measured. I think future applications could be even stronger if a goal is about demographic benchmarks, share some historical context for the reviewers to show, are you looking to maintain those levels? Are you looking to increase them? And the why behind that. So again, context is always very, very helpful as we're trying to envision your success in these goal areas.
I agree with what you said, Chris, about the goal statement. I do appreciate your language and your methods, just as sort of as a qualitative aside in terms of your approach to the methods, that the surveys are designed from a place of curiosity. I thought that was just really lovely. And sort of that you're looking at what captures your audience's imagination, what sparks their creativity. And I think I'd love to see you operationalize that. I think that, you know, any person who does evaluation, that's sort of one of the goals, right, is how do you quantify these very unquantifiable concepts? So please share if you figure that out. And I very much appreciated your budget explanations. I thought they had good detail there.
All right, so that concludes our time for Les Délices. Panelists, please submit your scores, and we'll turn next to the musical upcoming stars in the classics in just a moment. So our next application is from Music Upcoming Stars in the Classics for their project titled Expansion of the Cabaret Concert Series. The Classical Cabaret Series provides an opportunity for Northeast Ohio audiences to experience unusual classical repertoire performed by exceptionally skilled young musicians who gain performance and producing experience as they help to plan and execute the concerts. Music will present 3 concerts at the Church of Western Reserve and a new concert in Collinwood as part of the Classical Cabaret Concert Series that will provide these opportunities for over 30 emerging artists. Would someone like to get us started around how the application relates to public benefit criterion, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
I'll start. I rated this strong, and I specifically because their goal is to give young college conservatory musicians these public performance opportunities, which are vital for their career paths. And I was looking more inward in their, as what I was seeing as their community being these musicians, as opposed to, you know, a broader music attending audience. And I like the fact that they are connected to all of the major greater Cleveland area, Cuyahoga County area schools that have strong music programs.
I too marked it strong for the same reasons. And I also thought that by utilizing the networks of the young musicians that the organization serves to find future recipients of support, that demonstrates a plan for listening and responding to at least one of their communities.
I appreciated the organization's clear definition of how the organization was established based on this community need, and it felt very much like the organization has continued that public benefit throughout their history. I really enjoy, like Ethan said, the diverse group that curates kind of the next phase of recipients.
All right, so next we'll go ahead and move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criterion, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
Okay, I'll jump in. I rated them strong here as well for two specific reasons. Their commitment to including music by living composers and composers of African or African American, South American, other non-European heritages, and also a strong use of engaging the community of the student musicians by having them be a part of the repertoire selection.
I also rated this as strong for the reasons Chris just identified. And I just wanted to note the mention of the post-concert receptions for the more informal dialogue. I thought that was a really nice touch. The importance of paying emerging artists. I believe the language was it helps them to up their game professionally. I think that's very sensitive to the issues of emerging artists. And their focus on keeping young professionals in their community, I think is really admirable.
I appreciate the organization's emphasis on not only building the capacity of artists, but I like that they also touched on the capacity of various venues throughout the greater Cleveland area. I thought that can be just as important to cultural vibrancy for the community.
Yes, for the same reason. I appreciate what you said, Francis. I was going to say I have a note where I'm keeping a tally in all of these applications of how many times praxis comes up. And so they came up here too, which is all very exciting. And just another note, because I agree with everything my colleagues have said, that this was very strong and I appreciated your collaborative processes.
All right, so the final criterion to discuss organizational capacity. Our organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
I can launch off here. I thought that this application was on the high end of fair in this regard. I appreciate, like we've already mentioned, that the artists are being paid. I would have liked a little bit more detail about the idea to offer a free concert in that accessible location and how that accessible location was determined, and then the reviews of that location or evaluation, I guess.
I also went on the high end of fair. The project leadership is solid and experienced. I felt like the stated goal is really a reiteration of the project itself, and not a goal within the project. So for a future application, look at something within your project that you can identify and be specific about and measure success against.
I marked the section strong. I thought for the reasons already stated, the administrative team and advisory board are clearly experienced and well-equipped. The budget is clear. There's a specifically stated plan for the use of funds, an alternative source of funding available, and the organization has demonstrated consistent growth over the past years despite the effects of the pandemic.
All right, so that concludes our time for musical upcoming stars in the classics. Panelists, please submit your scores and we'll turn next to Notre Dame College in just a moment. So our next application is from Notre Dame College for their project titled Notre Dame College 5th Annual Honors Band Festival. The Notre Dame College Honors Band Festival will welcome more than 50 of the brightest aspiring musicians to South Euclid as they participate and perform in a two-day workshop festival. Performers will have to listen to symphony from Akron Symphonic Winds, be mentored by a leading conductor, attend a masterclass, and perform in the NDC Wind Symphony. Would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to public benefit, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
I will start. I rated this on the high end of weak. I felt that many of the questions were answered from the lens of the college as an entire entity, and were not focused on the project itself, which is what we're here to evaluate. I did not see clear definitions of the community of students the college wants to attract for this 2-day program, or how the project is being designed with input from students or their high school music teachers.
Agree with what Christopher said. I've also wanted to point out that just utilizing the college's marketing strategy might not be the best in terms of reaching your targeted community. And again, it felt like a very internal focused application as opposed to reaching the public and really coming to this from the public's point of view.
I marked this section fair. I think Chris's observation about the application referencing the institution as opposed to the project would apply to every section of the application. I thought the applicant is taking important strides towards equity and inclusion. It's clear they have plans in place to ensure participation from a diversity of lived experiences. The applicant articulates a, quote, strict policy against not allowing all to participate, but it isn't clear how this policy is impacted by the audition process. So for instance, what participation opportunities are available to students who don't pass auditions. There were few specific partnerships with other stakeholders articulated, but the survey plan indicates at least some means to respond to community feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Leslie.
I agree with what everybody has said. I gave this a fair. I felt like some of the language was very general. We believe in inclusivity and make accommodations for everyone. I would have loved some specifics about that. Your buildings are accessible. We work with every population. What exactly do you mean? And what population are you looking to engage in this? I appreciate that you have scholarships, and that it's relatively an affordable program, and you're recognizing it's not going to be affordable for everybody.
I again agree with all my colleagues. I have this on the high end of weak as well. For the same reasons Chris had, I thought you articulated that so well, this idea that it really is seemingly very internally focused. And I do think we see hints of how that isn't actually how you're operating. And so I just need more clarity and specifics in terms of how you're listening or responding to your community, and sort of your evidence of sustained relationships and how you're building relationships within the community.
All right, next we'll move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criterion, which is the organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I can go first. I marked this section as weak. I thought there was little detailed information about the educational opportunities that would actually be offered as a part of the project. And most of the information about how the applicant will create a relevant project is equally vague. So for instance, saying they will implement a successful marketing strategy without explaining what that entails or how they can expect it to be successful. And then related, the supporting documentation contained no material that was specific to the Band Honors Festival.
I agree with Ethan that it was very vague in all of the answers to the questions. So I'll emphasize there wasn't a whole lot about who was going to be involved or how they were going to be involved. So I didn't have an understanding of how these young artists were really being elevated in their career. And then again, we've already noted the inclusivity plan. It's noted, but then there's not really any details about that plan in this application.
I also rated weak in this area. I did not see any information about how they were specifically building capacity with these young musicians through the program. And I wanted to know more about how the professors listed were specifically engaged in the project. What were their roles going to be?
All right, moving to the final criterion to discuss organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
I noted this as fair in that I thought that the background shared at the college staff and faculty were strong. But again, there was very impressive statistics shared, but the capacity of the program and the departments noted in the application were not really shared. So I didn't have a good understanding of whether or not there was a significant capacity.
I also rated fair. I mean, obviously having the resources available through an institution of higher learning are helpful. Many standalone nonprofits don't have that built-in capacity, but I didn't get a deep sense of the planning for this specific project. And again, I made another comment that so many of the answers were about the institution and not about the project.
I rated this as strong just because I think I'm jealous of having an external evaluator. I mean, who has that? So I think that speaks to your capacity and your resources. I would have loved more specific information about that. There was a reference to encouraging reflection via evaluation, which I think is a great and interesting concept idea. I would love more information about that.
I went with strong on this as well, for many of the reasons Leslie identified. I think that maybe IRB approval, I'm not sure whether that's just a requirement of the university for that evaluation, but that might be a lot of power to put to it, but still great that you have that. And I did appreciate your explanation of the budget. It was nice to have some detail there.
I also marked this section strong for the reasons already stated. The only area that I thought could use little elaboration was the plan for securing alternative funding. And I think that the level of clarity and detail that the applicant communicated in this section should be brought to the aforementioned sections.
And that concludes our time for Notre Dame College. Panelists, please submit your scores and we'll turn next to Waterloo Arts in just a minute. So our next application is from Waterloo Arts for their project titled Waterloo Art Fest. The Waterloo Arts Fest is the largest annual event in the Collinwood neighborhood of Cleveland for the past 20 years, and it's played a pivotal role in rejuvenating a sense of neighborhood pride in the Lakeside community. Waterloo Arts works with over 300 artists, residents, and businesses to provide fresh programming each year that draws together a diverse group of art and music lovers of all ages. Would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to the public benefit criterion, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
I rated this as very strong and just a great example of how one of these festivals can really come from the community. The need for this event was really demonstrated and described. The community was really well described for me who hasn't, no knowledge about it. And that the desire for this infusion of arts in this community was coming from the community members themselves, the neighborhood itself. I like the mention of taking pride.
Second Leslie's comments in that I thought that the organization and the application very strongly demonstrated public benefit. It's really woven throughout the DNA of the organization. And I particularly like the idea of placekeeping and utilizing the festival to placekeep the neighborhood through the arts.
I rated this as strong as well. I thought there was good cross-sector collaboration. And I just wanted to bring out this statement because I very much appreciated it. The idea that they're patiently building trust between neighbors, which sort of speaks to the long-term investment and the way communities are built and relationships are built, that it is not done quickly and it is not done intensively, but it is those little engagements. And so that indicates to me that Waterloo really does acknowledge the way the community respect and power sharing kind of happens.
I rated fair in this area because I was looking for more details in the how they were achieving the work that my colleagues have already talked about. And I personally didn't feel that the use of quotes and comments and anecdotes was the strongest way to answer some of the questions about how they're connecting with their community and being inclusive and engaging their diverse populations.
I marked the section as strong. I thought the applicant demonstrated a clear sense of who their community is, but potentially even more importantly, they identify with the community. I thought that I agree with Chris's point that narrative, anecdote, storytelling, you wouldn't want to depend on that exclusively, but I didn't know that I felt that the organization was. I feel like there was a nice mix of anecdotal storytelling and then data. I thought they were clear. And with regard to power sharing, moving the festival to September, I thought demonstrated a very tangible way they've responded to community feedback.
I agree with that. I rated this strong as well. I like the sprinkling of the quotes and anecdotal information. I think they had a good mix of that gives me the flavor. I enjoy that qualitative information. I also I have a note that I thought the guiding principles behind this were very, very thoughtful. And that, again, that the event really is community driven.
Next, we'll move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criterion, which is an organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I can start here. I thought that this was an incredibly strong demonstration of vibrancy. I thought the concept of no headliners or main stage was really an interesting way to promote equity among the different groups and for the different musicians and presenters. And I also enjoyed that presenters were encouraged to incorporate their own programming, lending an additional piece of vibrancy that isn't just reliant on the festival.
I apologize. My last comments were about this section, just FYI. I jumped ahead.
I also marked this section strong. I thought the project clearly engages a diverse team of artists, and in paying all musicians a admittedly modest stipend, it has the means of helping these artists grow in their capacity. It would have been good to hear what strategies are in place to grow the capacity of other artists and vendors. By that, I just mean like non-musicians. There are clear processes of ensuring community relevance, specifically in, having the volunteer committee to review applications.
Any final comments on artistic and cultural vibrancy? All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to the final criterion, which is organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
I again rated this section as strong. I sincerely appreciate the streamlining of those repetitive processes that can really take away from the vibrancy and other aspects of public benefit and elevating the arts. I would encourage the organization to look at their pay structures to ensure that beyond modest, that the pay structure is fair and equitable.
I marked this section strong. It seems the executive director and their team of volunteers have the experience running the festival successfully. The goal that they articulated is specific, measurable, and seemingly easily achievable. The budget is clear. It shows diverse sources of income, as well as a clear plan for the use of funds. The only thing that gave me a little bit of pause was it would be good if the alternative to not receiving the grant was something other than moving forward with the festival in a way that would put a strain on staff. So that's something to consider.
I rated this strong as well. And for those keeping count, I think they also are working with Praxis. While I would love to see a goal statement that also includes kind of measuring the impact of the festival itself, I do think that you're looking at it from this lens of engaging new businesses is a good indicator of community standing and relationship building. And I think it could also be interesting to pair that with how many sustained relationships there are and measuring the quality of those longstanding relationships. So that's just an evaluation opportunity to demonstrate the trust building to which you've alluded to in previous sections. And I really appreciated the mention of the interactive community reflection wall. I think that's a really lovely method and way of also contributing to that vibrancy in the previous section. The donation of space to Play Arts Local, all of those things. A lot of great work centered around the festival and the relationships built through it.
I also rated strong in this area for all the reasons that have been stated by my colleagues.
You're on mute, Davon.
Wow. Well, thank you, panelists, for your reviews of Waterloo Arts. Please submit your scores and we'll turn to West Side Community House in just 1 second. So our next application is West Side Community House for their project titled Summer of Sisterhood. Summer of Sisterhood is an immersive summer arts camp in which 25 to 30 girls ages 10 through 18 with vastly different interests, personalities, and levels of artistic ability combine the power of their voices to create original music and art, and a live performance and showcase of their original work done by the end of the summer. Under the intensive guidance of accomplished local artists, the girls are immersed in music, art, dance, step, songwriting, and poetry. Would someone like to get us started with how this application relates to public benefit criterion, which is the organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its project?
Organization had a strong demonstration of public benefit and the combined power of those voices of participants and the established relationships with its specific geographic community. And then the historic relationships really fostering the trust in the program among participants. I would have liked to see a little bit more about how participants are recruited to audition and then the selection criteria for those local schools. I think that would have really helped the application.
I also rated strong here. While the program's impact might be limited to a small number of participants, I think that impact goes very deep with those participants, and I saw the value in that.
I also rated it strong. I thought the applicant had a clear understanding of who their community is and is very deliberate and thoughtful about being inclusive and engaging students with unique lived experiences. In particular, the emphasis on self-expression seemed self-expression on a variety of, in some cases, very serious topics seemed a very genuine form of listening and responsiveness to community.
All right, next we'll move on to artistic and cultural vibrancy funding criterion, which is an organization's ability to create a relevant and engaging project.
I mark this as strong. The program itself feels very thoughtful and intensive. The content is driven by the girls' experiences. They have ongoing relationships with these girls who some come repeatedly, and they are developing lasting connections with them. And the samples were awesome. The sample songs that were included with the application really gave me a lot of faith in the quality of the program.
Chris, you're muted. I'm gonna let you go before I go.
Oh, okay. I thought I had unmuted and then the sign came up. I also rated strong from the aspect that the participants themselves make the project's creative decisions. The themes they explore are broad, specifically related to their communities and their lived experiences.
On everything that's been said, but I also enjoy that the curriculum of arts experiences rotates through. And then I also appreciate the addition of the post-production and the marketing, which is so important for encouraging a longstanding relationship with the arts. Again, I would have liked just a little bit more information about how the teaching artists are selected for participation, and then how the participants in the program are engaged in the arts beyond the just camp experience.
I rated this strong as well. And I think this is such a great example of how an actual program description and process of creation kind of helps meet all the criteria that have been laid out by CAC. It's just a really beautiful example of how you can meet all of that through the creative process.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move to the final criterion, which is to discuss the organizational capacity, or organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project.
I can start. I marked this section fair. The project goal within the application, again, reads as a reiteration of the project itself and lacks specificity and measurable outcomes related to that goal. The accomplishments as listed are the project's culminating outcomes. So, looking forward to being able to list a more specific measurable goal, I think would strengthen future applications. I was hoping that at least one of the attachments would have included, visual elements, photos that showed an overview of the entire process, which I think could strengthen our understanding of what is, obviously a very beneficial program.
I went with strong on this. I do agree with what you're saying about the goal statement, Chris. And I think that you have to dig a little bit too deep into the statement to see where you actually see a really great statement of goal in terms of impact. And then you have to go into that method to correlate with how you're measuring that. And so I think that remove the language where your goal is the completion of the project, because again, we're going in assuming you're going to do that, and really get to like why you're doing it. What is the impact you're trying to get, which again, you see that you're doing that through surveys, weekly surveys, things like that. And I would love to see an example of that, again, just to get a sense of how you're asking that, what your methods are. I did appreciate your budget detail and thought your budgetary explanations were helpful.
Reason that I thought that this organizational capacity was strong. I would have been interested to see, once again, a little bit more detail about how the staff that are hired for this program are overlapping with the program participants in geographies or lived experiences. But I appreciate that you're bringing on additional staff to facilitate, and I thought the request from CAC was appropriate.
I marked this section strong for the reasons already stated, and the only thing I'll add is that I thought it was nice to see not only a schedule for the project, but a schedule for the preparation of the project.
All right, and so that concludes our time for the West Side Community House. Panelists, please submit your scores. And with that being said, that was the last review of the session. So we'll give me one moment. So I just want to thank our panelists for your thoughtful comments and your participation today. I'd like to give each panelist a moment to share any general feedback around the process or applications, and remind audience members that they can do the same via the online public comment form at cacgrants.org/panel. I'll go ahead and post the order for our panelists to follow if you have any further comments.
All right. Thank you so much to CAC and to my fellow panelists and to all of the applicants. It was a real joy. I always love reading these applications. And like I said, I did have my little informal count that was making me smile about how many of you are collaborating with other organizations whose grants I've read in the past, like Praxis. And I will say Praxis is such a powerful example of a really community engaged, hopefully it's still our organization. So really great to see that. The two notes that I have just looking over all of the applications, again, amazing things happening in Cleveland, is one, really exploring this idea of power sharing, because I think that frequently that just came up as a recurring theme of how are we seeing that? And that's a really hard one to do. I look back at my portfolio of programs that I've designed and realize that I have failed on that front. colossally because it is a really difficult concept and definitely difficult to implement. And then the second would be goals and methods. So make sure that your goals are specific and measurable, yes, and aren't just completion of your project, because again, I'm assuming you're going to do that and do that beautifully, but I really want to see the impact of the work you're doing. And then the methods will follow pretty naturally once you have a really good goal statement in that respect. But great job. So excited. I love Cleveland. I think you are what makes it beautiful. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll add that I thought just as a collective whole, all of these applications were really strong and just demonstrates a lot of artistic vibrancy and organizational capacity in Cleveland as a region. There were several of these applications that me, as somebody based not too far in Erie, PA, was like, oh snap, I want to go down to Cleveland when that thing happens. So yeah, that was really great to see. In terms of the aspect of power sharing, which is admittedly like one of the more difficult things to think about and articulate, especially if you're a legacy institution or a classical institution. Those can be really challenging for some of those kinds of organizations. One piece of criticism that was brought up for another application really stood out to me, which is rather than focusing on the deficits of a community, focusing on what that community brings to a partnership. I think that can be a really important and useful step into power sharing. Like, what do you appreciate about your community can then lead you to what does our community bring to us, that can lead to how can we bring that out of that community towards us. That can be an interesting way to pursue how does our organization do power sharing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this process. Thank you to everybody. I feel like I learned stuff. Okay, so I've never been to Cleveland, so now I want to go. An incredibly vibrant community, clearly. I thought overall the applications were really strong. And I wanted to add to what other folks have said that it's okay to do qualitative evaluation. And it's harder and more labor intensive. And I realize that capacity is limited at most nonprofit organizations, but there are ways to do it that can be manageable and really, really fruitful, because we all struggle with measuring the impact of the arts, right? A lot of it is immeasurable or hard to put in words, which is why we make art, because it's not words. Well, sometimes it is. Anyway, and then for me, an outsider, I've never been to Cleveland, I confess. Very, very clear description of the community that you're serving. Act like an alien is descending on your community and you're describing it. There was one application where it was like, this has a small town feel. And like, that may seem incidental, but to me that was helpful in terms of describing your community. Anyway, thank you so much.
I actually do have some knowledge of Cleveland and greater Cuyahoga County at a previous position that had an organization with a national focus. I had the opportunity to travel to Cleveland a number of consecutive years and had dear friends living there as well, although I have not had the opportunity to attend as many of the opportunities as we get to review when we do panels. It's obviously such a vibrant and proud arts community. The one thing I would bring up that has not been stated yet is number 15 in the application, which is the project goal, which is, sort of my rabbit hole in this. And the way it's stated is, in addition to completing this project, what goal does your organization want to accomplish by doing this project? And many of the applications, it really felt like you just reiterated what your project was. And they talk about, the acronym of the SMARTY, make sure it's, specific and measurable, in addition to being achievable, realistic, time targeted, and inclusive and equitable. So, and the way we were guided was, to look for a specific goal that was within your overall project of something you wanted to achieve. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at the way they choose to state a goal, and then to answer how they're going to show their definition of accomplishing that goal.
Problem of going last. I feel like I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but again, not being from the Cleveland area or not having the joy, I think now of going to Cleveland, it's definitely going to be on my calendar for the Greater Cuyahoga Arts and Arts. It's very vibrant, and I enjoyed learning about all the various pieces going on in the community. The piece I would have said to all of the applicants is really helping us understand, as panelists who don't have the joy of living and being in your community, really helping us understand the demographic makeups and how your organizations and your projects are really elevating those communities through the power of the arts. Again, like Leslie said, the arts are hard to put into words, but I think that we're all doing these projects in our respective works because we believe in the power of the arts to uplift and really celebrate community. So just leveraging the data that's available and it is going to be helpful in future applications.
Thank you for your comments and feedback. So panelists, I'll ask that you guys stay in the meeting room as we close the live stream. And the listeners that are with us, panel continues today at noon in our next Zoom session. So we'll see you there.